was an aircraft mechanic, or an aircraft engineer, licensed aircraft engineer. Did an apprenticeship, went through the ranks, worked on line maintenance for a while, and then went overseas and worked as a tech rep for aircraft manufacturer, and then came back to Australia and worked with an airline here doing acquisition and disposal of aircraft from the fleet. I first thought that things weren't right when I went on a business trip to Toulouse and was going on a training course, and when I arrived there I felt really very, very anxious and very unwell, and I was having difficulty sleeping, and I initially thought it was a bit of jet lag, but the anxiety was just terrible and I couldn't focus and I couldn't concentrate, couldn't continue my normal daily work. What was going through my head at the time was this strange thought pattern that everything was going wrong, that nothing had achieved nothing and everything was bad in my life, and it was just amazing how it was all consuming. And it was on my mind 24/7, just wearing me out. When I came back from Europe, I sought help for my condition because it just wasn't getting any better and I wasn't sleeping and I couldn't function very well. And I then started to go and see the GP and look for help there, and then the GP realised quite quickly that I needed a little bit more assistance than that, so she organised for me to go and see a psychiatrist and a psychologist. My boss was a good friend of mine, so I was able to talk to him about it. And then as soon as I started seeing doctors, I would give him the details and explain to him what was going on. Most of my work colleagues were really quite empathetic, quite understanding of what happened. And it's one thing I did find is as soon as you start telling people, they've usually got a story themselves, or they've got a connection with someone else who's had something similar happen. And so that was how it worked out with my colleagues. I was quite surprised that so many of them had some experience already with it. Telling my story to people, I find it very liberating because I feel we're allowed to talk about it now better than we could. I've got a great support network around me these days. Through my psychiatrist, my psychologist. I also work with an OT, an occupational therapist, who works very closely with me about staying prepared to go back into the workplace. My health and fitness has been something I've always worked on. Running was something I think in a lot of ways probably staved off or kept the depression at bay for a little while. But then it's a bit of a contradiction because when I became unwell, it was the first thing that stopped. I do often see the light at the end of the tunnel, and I see myself being able to live a fulfilling life, although it will definitely be different from the one I had before. I think my advice to people in the workplace that would be struggling or have any form of mental illness would be, don't be afraid to acknowledge it. It really isn't any different to any other illness, and it only makes things worse if you do hold on to it and don't do anything about it. Get out and do something about it as early as you possibly can. I think my advice to managers out there would be to, if they see that someone is struggling or they suspect someone's struggling, is just to approach them and ask the question. You know, are they okay? Or open that link, give them the opportunity.